Hey all, just a short video to wrap up tolerance and withdrawal, and to talk about tolerance and withdrawal of benzodiazepines, and then just sort of wrap up some of the main points. I don't have a slide for the wrap up, it's just going to be verbal, but just some highlights of the things that I would expect you to know after this talk. Okay. So, benzodiazepine tolerance, the pharmacokinetic tolerance is minimal. There's no real change in metabolism enzymes, and metabolisms for benzodiazepines doesn't particularly change uh, with continued use. But there is fairly fast pharmacodynamic tolerance. This is mostly mediated through the downregulation of GABA A receptors, which, of course, since GABA A receptors are the target of benzodiazepines, what you're doing by down regulating those receptors is basically reducing the chances that your benzodiazepine will be able to diffuse in and find a free receptor. So you're going to need a larger dose in order to compensate for that lower concentration of target receptors. We also see a cross tolerance to barbiturates and alcohol. What this means is that if you have previous experience with barbiturates or are a heavy alcohol user and have developed a tolerance to either one, you will also have a tolerance to benzodiazepines. This often indicates that there's a common pharmacological target between those different substances. This is also seen in opioids, like if you have extensive experience with heroin, morphine is going to be less effective with you, right? You're going to have a higher tolerance for morphine even if you've never used morphine. So that's what we mean by cross tolerance. The tolerance does not develop equally to all effects of benzodiazepines, though. We see very rapid tolerance to the sedation, the hypnosis. It should say hypnotic there. When I say hypnosis and hypnotic, what I mean is the ability to induce sleep. Anticonvulsant, so the anti-seizure effects, that is one of the reasons why benzodiazepines are not a great long-term anti-epilepsy medication. Oftentimes they are given in conjunction with other anti-epilepsy medications, but they're really great as a short-term immediate response to stop the seizure. So you don't have to worry about tolerance in those cases, but you do see a rapid tolerance to the anticonvulsant effects and the motor slowness effects. You see a slow tolerance to the anti-anxiety effects, the memory effects. Remember, anterograde amnesia is a common behavioral effect, and that usually does not go away with continued use, and the cognition effects. So some people find that when they're on benzodiazepines, their cognition feels slowed or impaired, and you don't really develop much of a tolerance to that effect. Of course, there is a high person-to-person variability with all of these effects and the speed at which you develop tolerance. It's also going to have to do with your method of administration, how often you're taking it, and what dose you're taking it. Larger doses, more frequently, are going to have faster tolerance but still, the tolerance is going to develop to these effects much more quickly than to these effects. Okay. So with both barbiturate or benzodiazepine withdrawal, you're going to see these different effects: agitation, delirium, convulsions, weakness, anxiety, nausea and vomiting, sleep disturbances, tremors, hallucinations, dangerously high fevers, and seizures. So the convulsions and seizures is basically a repetition of itself. A seizure is going to refer to the electrical activity within the cortex. Convulsions can also refer to like muscle spasms. But they're going to have sort of a common underlying mechanism in the cortex. So as with all drugs, the withdrawal effects are often the opposite of the effects that you get from taking the drug. So when you take the drug, you experience an anxiolytic effect. When you go into withdrawal, you can experience anxiety. So if you use benzodiazepines to treat your anxiety, and you develop a physical dependence, remember, not a psychological dependence, just a physical dependence. That's what withdrawal tells us is present. You would want to taper off your dose in order to avoid experiencing any of these in a severe manner. The reason that this withdrawal can be medically serious is because of the seizures, right? Those convulsions and seizures can be really dangerous and lethal. So that's our main concern. That and the dangerously high fevers are going to be why it's considered medically dangerous, right? So this can lead to some psychological dependence, mostly through negative reinforcement, right? These withdrawal effects are pretty aversive, and so you want to avoid those aversive effects, so you take the drug. The psychological dependence, though, it's not that it's causing euphoria, it's that it's helping you avoid something negative. So one of the big ones here is the sleep disturbances. Sleep disturbances are going to drive people back to the drug that was helping them sleep very often. We saw this with cannabis as well. Being unable to sleep becomes really intolerable very quickly. So much more than nausea and vomiting. Or a tremor. Or being agitated. So the sleep disturbances are often one of the main withdrawal effects that will drive people back. So we've talked about the comparison of barbiturates and benzodiazepines. Some of the highlights here would be the differences in mechanisms of action and the differences in therapeutic index. And some of the behavioral effects are different as well. The behavioral effects of benzodiazepines and the pharmacodynamics. You should be thinking about how the behavioral effects are linked to the subunit composition of the GABA A receptor. You should also know how the GABA A receptor, how benzodiazepines achieve their effect on the GABA A receptor, and specifically what that effect is, and how it would be affected by changes in GABA concentration. You should be able to tell me a little bit about addiction to benzodiazepines. How likely is it? How severe is it? How common is it? What data do we have to back that up? Which populations might be more vulnerable? And what is the circuitry involved? And how do benzodiazepines drive that circuitry? For tolerance and withdrawal, that's just sort of what we just talked about. That is it for benzodiazepines. There are top hat questions about benzodiazepines, so make sure that you go do those. They're worth about 10 points overall. And next up, we'll do a case study that will help us sort of bridge between benzodiazepines and alcohol. Maybe I will see you all in class later this week. Have a good day.